What was being a cowboy really like? For so long, we've turned cowboys into symbols of myths and adventure, but the truth is stranger than you think, and we're about to get into the small, unglamorous details that made cowboy life both harder and more human than we remember. Let's start with your saddle, because everything began and ended there. You'd spend 16, sometimes 18 hours in that saddle, and it wasn't some comfortable throne. It was a wooden tree frame wrapped in leather that cost you 3 months' wages. Feel the weight of it in your hands, maybe 40 pounds of tooled leather and rawhide that you'd hoist onto your horse before dawn. The smell hit you first. Old sweat, saddle soap, and that distinct scent of leather that's been rained on and dried 100 times. You'd run your hand over the horn, worn smooth from your rope work, feeling the grooves where the hemp had cut into the leather during hard pulls. Cowboys didn't sit in saddles like you sit in a chair. You stood in the stirrups most of the day, your knees absorbing the shock, your thighs burning by mid-afternoon. Today, we think nothing of driving 8 hours in an air-conditioned car, but could you stand in a slight crouch for that long, feeling every jolt and stumble of an animal beneath you? That saddle was your office, your only personal space, and the tool that would either save your life or cripple you by the time you turned 40. Did you ever wonder why old cowboys walked with that distinctive bow-legged gait? Now consider your actual pay, because the money strips away the romance fast. You earned roughly $1 a day, maybe $30 a month if you were lucky, and that was for skilled labor that required you to be a horseman, a veterinarian, a navigator, a fighter, and a weatherman all at once. Picture getting your wages at the end of a 3-month cattle drive. $90 in coins and bills that you'd fold into your pocket, knowing it had to last until the next job. The weight of those coins felt substantial, sure, but think about what they bought. A new pair of boots cost you $5. A half-decent meal in town ran you 50 cents, and a single night in a hotel bed, an actual mattress instead of the ground, took another 50 cents. You'd watch 2 months of brutal work vanish in a week of town living, the money slipping through your fingers for basic necessities and maybe 1 or 2 small comforts. Today, a minimum wage worker makes more in a single day than you earned in a week of risking your life. Run the math in your head. Sleeping outside in all weather, eating the same beans and hardtack for months, wrestling 1,000-pound animals, all for wages that today wouldn't cover your phone bill. Does that sound like the glamorous frontier life you imagined? Let's talk about your morning routine, because dawn on the trail was nothing like rolling out of bed at home. You'd wake to the night wrangler's call, usually around 4 in the morning when the stars were still bright and the temperature had dropped to its coldest point. Feel that moment when you first open your eyes and remember you're not in a bed but on the ground, your blanket damp with dew, your body stiff from sleeping on dirt. You'd sit up, your back screaming from yesterday's work, and pull on boots that were still wet from the river crossing 2 days ago. The leather was cold and clammy against your feet, and you'd know you had another full day ahead before those boots would dry out. Your first task was always the remuda, the herd of spare horses. You'd walk through the pre-dawn darkness to where they were gathered, your breath visible in the cold air, and rope the horse you'd ride that morning. Cowboys rotated through multiple horses each day because no single animal could handle the constant work, so you needed to know each horse's personality, which one spooked at snakes, which one had a smooth gait for long stretches, which one you could trust in a tight situation with an angry steer. Today, you might debate which car to drive based on gas mileage, but could you select the right horse in dim light based on the terrain and cattle behavior you anticipated that day? Before you'd even had coffee, and it would be bitter, reheated trail coffee that tasted like boiled dirt, you'd already made a dozen decisions that could determine whether you lived through the day. When was the last time your morning routine involved that kind of calculation? Think about the dust, because nothing defines trail life like the dust. When you rode drag position, the worst job usually given to the newest or youngest cowboys, you spent the entire day at the back of a cattle herd. Imagine that, breathing through a bandana that was supposed to filter the air but really just got caked with mud from your own breath mixing with the dust. You'd taste it on your tongue, gritty and metallic, feel it in your teeth, blink it out of your eyes until they were red and swollen. By midday, your face would be coated in a layer of brown film, your clothes stiff with it, your hair so full of dirt that you could shake your head and create your own little dust storm. The sound was constant too, thousands of hooves hitting dry earth, creating a low rumble you felt in your chest as much as heard. Your horse would be coated in the same dust, and you'd feel bad for the animal, knowing it was breathing the same air, working just as hard. Today we complain about a long commute or bad traffic, but we're sitting in a filtered environment, climate controlled. Could you breathe dust dust for 10 hours straight, every day for 3 months, knowing tomorrow would be exactly the same? Have you ever tasted your work environment with every breath? Your rope deserves its own moment, because that length of hemp was more than a tool. It was an extension of your arm and your only means of control over animals that outweighed you by a factor of 10. Feel the weight of it coiled in your left hand, maybe 30 feet of 3/4-inch hemp that you'd braided and maintained yourself during the quiet evening hours. The texture was rough against your palm, and you'd built up calluses in specific spots where the rope ran through your fingers during a throw. You practiced constantly, roping fence posts, bushes, anything that stood still, because when you needed to rope a running steer, you got one chance. Picture the motion. You'd build your loop, spinning it overhead with your right hand while your left controlled the coil, your eyes locked on the target. The rope sang as it cut through the air, and you'd feel the exact moment to release, sending the loop flying toward horns or feet. When you caught your target, the rope would snap tight, and you'd dally it around your saddle horn in one smooth motion, feeling the hemp burn against the leather even through your gloves. Cowboys lost fingers this way. If you didn't dally correctly, the rope could catch your hand and take a finger or thumb before you could react. Your hat mattered more than you'd think, and not for the reasons Hollywood suggests. That wide-brimmed felt hat sitting on your head wasn't a fashion statement. It was a tool you used a dozen times a day for survival. Feel the weight of it, maybe a pound of densely packed felt that you'd shaped yourself by steaming and molding until it fit your head perfectly. The brim was wide, 4 to 5 inches, because you needed that shade when the sun beat down at noon and there wasn't a tree for 20 miles. You'd use it to fan campfires to life in the morning, to water your horse by scooping from a stream when you couldn't dismount, to signal other riders across long distances with broad waves. When rain came, and it came suddenly on the plains, turning the sky black in minutes, that hat channeled water away from your neck and face, though you'd still end up soaked and shivering. The felt would get stiff with dried sweat, the band inside stained dark from months of wear, and you'd reshape it constantly, working the brim back into form. A good hat cost you $10, a third of your monthly pay, but you bought the best you could afford because a cheap hat would fall apart in a season. Today, we wear hats as accessories, things we can forget in restaurants or lose without much thought. But when was the last time you owned something you depended on for shade, for signaling, for water, for warmth, and for protection from the elements? Could you justify spending a third of your monthly income on a single item because your comfort and safety demanded it? Let's discuss the food, because your stomach ruled more of your decisions than you'd admit. The trail cook was the second highest paid member of the crew for good reason. He was the only thing standing between you and starvation or mutiny. Picture the chuck wagon, a converted farm wagon with a hinged box at the back that folded down into a work table, filled with compartments for flour, salt pork, coffee, beans, and not much else. You'd smell the smoke from the cook fire before you saw it, and your stomach would clench with anticipation, even though you knew exactly what was coming. Beans, again, cooked with salt pork if you were lucky, served with hardtack or sourdough biscuits if the cook had time to bake. The beans were always slightly undercooked because the cook couldn't afford to waste time or firewood, so you'd feel them hard against your teeth, taste the smoke that had seeped into everything. Coffee was served black and strong enough to float a horseshoe, boiled in a pot directly on the coals until it was more bitter than any coffee you've ever tasted. On special occasions, maybe once a week, you'd get beef from a steer that had injured itself, and you'd watch the cook butcher it right there. Blood on his hands, flies gathering. The meat would be tough, cooked over open flame until it was charred on the outside and still pink in the middle, and you'd eat it with your fingers, grease running down your chin. There were no plates. Today we agonize over restaurant choices, scroll through delivery apps, debate cuisines and dietary preferences. But could you eat the same meal, cooked the same way, every single day for months, with no variation, no seasoning beyond salt, no option to say you're tired of it? Would your body accept that kind of monotony, that complete absence of choice? The river crossings deserve their own recognition because they were the moments when you truly earned your pay. Imagine approaching a river, maybe the Red River or the Arkansas, swollen with spring runoff, moving fast and brown with silt. You'd sit on your horse at the bank, watching the water, calculating. The herd behind you was nervous. Cattle can sense danger, and they'd be lowing and pressing together, reluctant to enter. Your job was to lead them in, to ride your horse into that current and trust the herd would follow. Feel the moment your horse steps off solid ground into the water, the sudden cold soaking through your boots and pants, rising to your waist as the horse began to swim. You'd hold on to the saddle horn with one hand, your rope in the other, keeping your horse's head pointed upstream against the current that wanted to sweep you downstream into deeper water. Behind you, hundreds of cattle would be entering the water, some swimming, some panicking and turning back, creating chaos. The sound was overwhelming, splashing, bellowing, men shouting, the roar of the river itself. You couldn't see the bottom bottom, couldn't know if your horse would find footing on the far side or step into a hole and go under. Cowboys drowned in river crossings regularly, pulled under by the current or by panicking cattle, their bodies found miles downstream days later. Today, we drive over bridges without a second thought, air conditioning humming, podcast playing, maybe we glance at the water below for a second. But when did you last do something where the risk of death was real and immediate? Where you had to trust your animal and your skills completely because there was no safety net, no rescue coming? How many times could you face that fear before it marked you permanently? Think about the loneliness, because cowboys didn't talk much, and there's a reason for that. You'd work alongside the same 6 or 8 men for months, seeing them every day from before dawn until after dark, and yet you'd know almost nothing about them. It wasn't hostile, just practical. Everyone was escaping something, running from something, or just trying to survive, and questions were considered rude. You'd learn a man's nickname, maybe Slim or Red or Kansas, but you'd never learn his real name or where he came from. The work was too hard for constant conversation anyway. You'd ride for hours with nothing but the sound of cattle and the creak of leather, alone with your thoughts in a way that would drive modern people crazy. No music, no podcasts, no phone to scroll, just the inside of your own head and the landscape rolling by. At night around the fire, men would talk about practical things, where water might be, whether the herd was healthy, if Indians had been spotted, but personal conversations were rare. You might work beside a man all season and learn he had a wife and children only when he mentioned leaving to go home. That silence built up inside you, all those unspoken thoughts and feelings, until some cowboys would hit town after a drive and talk nonstop to anyone who'd listen, desperate for human connection. Others never learned to talk again, growing more solitary with each year. Today we're never alone, never truly quiet, always connected to someone through some device, always stimulated. Could you handle 3 months of near silence, of living inside your head with no external distraction, of knowing the men around you but never really knowing them? What would you discover about yourself in that silence, and would you like what you found? Your boots were a constant source of pain and pride, custom made if you could afford it, broken in through months of suffering if you couldn't. Picture pulling on tall leather boots every morning, the shaft rising to just below your knee, designed to protect your legs from brush and snake bites and rope burns. The leather was thick, stiff when new, and it would take weeks of wearing them every day before they softened enough to be comfortable. But comfortable is relative. These boots had heels, 2 inches tall and angled forward, and give you leverage when you needed to brace against a roped steer. Walking in them was awkward, almost painful, because they weren't designed for walking. You'd feel the heel hit first with each step, throwing your weight forward, making you waddle slightly. Your toes were cramped in the pointed toe box, necessary for finding the stirrup quickly, but murder on your feet after a few hours. Inside the boots, you wore wool socks even in summer because cotton would bunch and blister, and you'd feel the sweat pooling, the damp wool chafing against your skin. When you finally pulled those boots off at night, you'd see your feet pale and wrinkled, maybe bleeding from new blisters, smelling like something that had died. You'd massage them, trying to restore circulation, knowing you'd be pulling those same boots on again in a few hours. Modern boots are designed for comfort, for fashion, for making a statement. But when was the last time you wore something specifically designed to keep you alive, even though it hurt you in the process? Could you accept that bargain? Pain for function, every single day. The night watch was where the job became something else entirely, where you moved beyond exhaustion into a strange, half-dreaming state. Picture yourself 2 hours after midnight, assigned to circle the herd in darkness, so complete you could barely see your horse's ears in front of you. The stars were overwhelming, more stars than you've ever seen in your life, so many they cast actual shadows on the ground, and you'd use them to navigate, keeping the North Star over your left shoulder as you rode your circuit. The cattle were bedded down but restless, and you could hear them breathing, smell them in the darkness, sense their mood by the way they shifted and stirred. You'd sing to them. Every cowboy did, not because you had a good voice, but because the sound calmed them, let them know a human was near and everything was safe. You'd make up songs, sing hymns your mother taught you, repeat the same verse over and over in a low voice that was barely more than a hum. Your voice would be hoarse from the day's dust, cracking on certain notes, but the cattle didn't care about quality. The trick was to never stop singing, never let silence build, because silence made them nervous, and nervous cattle could stampede. Feel the weight of that responsibility. 2,000 cattle worth someone's entire fortune, relying on your voice to keep them calm through the darkest hours. You'd fight sleep with every trick you knew, singing louder, shifting in the saddle, slapping your face. But sometimes, you'd doze for a few seconds and jerk awake, terrified you'd miss something, that the herd was gone. You'd see things in the darkness that weren't there, shapes moving at the edge of vision, hear sounds that might have been real or imagined. By the time your relief came, usually 2 hours later though it felt like 6, you'd be hollow, exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. Today we talk about working long hours, about burning the midnight oil, but we do it under electric lights with coffee available and the option to stop if we need to. Could you stay awake through pure force of will, knowing that falling asleep meant potential disaster, doing it night after night until you couldn't remember what real rest felt like? The kind that made you understand why ancient people invented gods of thunder. You'd see them building in the afternoon, clouds stacking up on the western horizon, turning purple-black, lightning flickering inside them like nervous energy. The air would change first, going still and heavy, pressing down on you until your ears pop and your horse would feel it too, getting jumpy and hard to control. Then, the wind would hit, sudden and violent, strong enough to push against you, to tear your hat off if the chin strap wasn't tight. The temperature would drop 20 degrees in minutes and you'd fumble with your slicker, a heavy canvas coat coated in linseed oil that was supposed to be waterproof, but never quite was. The first drops would be huge, warm, hitting your face like thrown pebbles, and then the sky would open up and the rain would come in sheets so thick you couldn't see 10 feet. Lightning would strike close enough that you'd feel the electricity in the air, smell the ozone, hear the crack boom with no delay between flash and thunder. Your horse would try to bolt, and you'd fight to control it, knowing that if you got separated from the herd in this, you might never find them again. The cattle would be running now, stampeding in panic, and you'd be riding blind in the storm, chasing sounds and shadows, hoping your horse knew where to go because you certainly didn't. The rain was cold, soaking through your slicker in minutes, running down your back, filling your boots. You'd be shivering violently, teeth chattering, hands numb on the reins, but you couldn't stop. Couldn't seek shelter because the herd was scattering and every animal that ran off was money lost. These storms could last hours, and you'd endure them on horseback, exposed, doing a job that seemed impossible. Today we watch storms through windows, safe and dry, maybe post a photo of dramatic clouds on social media. But when did you last face nature at its most violent with nothing between you and it but canvas and determination? Could you ride through that fear, that cold, that chaos, knowing your job demanded it? Let's talk about the injuries, because cowboy work destroyed bodies in ways we sanitize in stories. You'd see men with fingers missing, taken by ropes or caught in equipment, the stumps healed over rough and scarred. You'd know riders who'd been dragged, their skin scraped away by hard ground until you could see muscle and bone, their faces permanently marked by gravel embedded in scars. Horse wrecks were common. Your horse would step in a hole at full gallop and go down, and you'd fly through the air and hit the ground so hard the air exploded from your lungs, and you'd lie there wondering if your back was broken, if you'd ever breathe again. You'd get up if you could, check yourself for breaks, spit blood from a bitten tongue or split lip, catch your horse if it hadn't run off, and get back to work because there was no alternative. Hernias were epidemic from the constant lifting and roping, your guts literally tearing through your abdominal wall, and you'd wear a truss, a leather belt with a pad that pushed the hernia back in, and just keep working, because surgery was expensive and recovery meant no income. Saddle sores were inevitable, raw patches on your inner thighs and buttocks where skin rubbed against leather for so many hours that it blistered and bled and then hardened into calluses. You'd develop arthritis in your 20s, your joints swollen and painful from constant impact and cold nights on the ground. Teeth rotted from poor diet and no dental care, and you'd have them pulled by a ranch hand with pliers and whiskey for anesthetic, or you'd just let them obsess and live with the pain. But could you accept injury as just a cost of working, something to endure and work through, with no safety net and no guarantee you'd heal properly? Your relationship with your horse went deeper than any human friendship because your life literally depended on understanding each other. Think about spending 16 hours a day on the same animal, feeling its moods through your legs, learning to read its ear positions and head movements like a language. You'd know when your horse was tired by the way its stride shortened, when it was scared by how its muscles tensed beneath you, when it was angry by the set of its tail. You'd talk to it constantly, not expecting answers but needing to communicate. Your voice part of the partnership. A good horse would sense cattle movement before you saw it, would know when to speed up or slow down, would keep working even when exhausted because it understood the job. You'd feel guilty pushing it too hard, feel the animal's fatigue in your own body, and you'd you'd swap to a fresh horse, not just for performance, but because you couldn't stand to keep hurting your partner. At night, you'd unsaddle carefully, checking for sores or injuries, rubbing down the sweaty patches, making sure it got to water and grass before you ate. You'd know each horse's quirks. This one didn't like its ears touched. That one would bite if you didn't watch it. Another one hated water crossings. When a horse got injured badly enough that it couldn't work anymore, you'd have to shoot it, and some cowboys would do it themselves because they couldn't bear to let anyone else, while others would walk away and let someone else pull the trigger because they couldn't do it at all. Today, we treat vehicles as tools, things we use and discard, complain about and replace, our relationship purely transactional. But when was the last time you depended on another living being so completely that you'd die without it? Could you develop that kind of bond, that depth of communication and trust, knowing it might end with you putting a bullet in your partner's head because there was no other option? The branding sessions were controlled chaos that revealed which men were truly skilled and which were just pretending. Picture a spring morning when the calves were old enough to brand. The whole crew gathered around temporary corrals built from whatever wood you could find or rope strung between trees. You'd have a fire going, irons heating in the coals until they glowed orange, the smell of hot metal and smoke thick in the air. Your job might be roping, riding into the corral and lassoing calves by their hind legs, dragging them to the branding crew. Feel the calf hit the end of your rope, its weight yanking against your saddle, your horse bracing and backing up to keep the rope tight. The calf would be bawling, terrified, and you'd feel bad for it, but the work had to be done. Two men would wrestle the calf down, one grabbing the front legs, one the back, stretching the animal out flat. The brander would press the hot iron against the calf's hip, and you'd hear the sizzle, smell the burning hair and flesh, see the smoke rising. The calf would scream, a sound that went through you no matter how many times you heard it, and its mother would be somewhere nearby, bellowing in distress. If the calf was male, the castration came next, a quick knife cut and the testicles removed. The ear notch came last, a distinctive cut that marked ownership even from a distance. The whole process took maybe 2 minutes per calf, and you'd do hundreds in a day. Your arms aching from roping, your clothes covered in dust and blood, and worse. The sound was constant. Calves crying, mothers answering, men shouting, horses snorting, the pop and crackle of the fire. Today, we buy our meat wrapped in plastic, disconnected from the animal it came from, the violence and blood sanitized away. But could you participate in that process, inflicting pain because economics demanded it, smelling and hearing and seeing the reality of turning animals into property? Would you eat those fresh testicles that night, prepared in the coals, because protein was protein and waste was a sin? The wildlife encounters reminded you constantly that you weren't the apex predator you pretended to be, and the fear never diminished no matter how many you encountered. Some cowboys carried snakebite kits, little suction devices and tourniquets that probably didn't work, but most just accepted that a bite meant you might die. Simple as that. You'd slit the wound, try to suck out venom, drink whiskey to thin the blood, and hope you were strong enough to survive. Wolves would circle the herd at night, their eyes reflecting your campfire, their howls, raising every hair on your body with primal fear that went back thousands of years. You'd fire shots in the air to scare them off, waste precious ammunition on intimidation, knowing that a pack could take down a calf or even a full-grown steer if they were hungry enough. Bears were worse, grizzlies especially, enormous and unpredictable, and if you saw one, you'd freeze, back away slowly, pray it wasn't interested in you. Your pistol was useless against a grizzly unless you were an incredible shot, and your rifle was back with your saddle, so you'd just be meat if the bear decided to charge. Mountain lions would follow the herd, taking the weak and sick, and you'd find kills in the morning, partially eaten carcasses that reminded you something was hunting in the darkness while you slept. Scorpions would crawl into your boots overnight, and you'd learn to shake them out every morning, once finding one the hard way by feeling its sting between your toes. The pain, electric and immediate. Today we live in controlled environments, our dangers managed and minimized, wildlife something we observe through screens or from the safety of cars. But when did you last sleep knowing predators were circling, that poisonous creatures shared your space, that you were part of the food chain and not necessarily at the top? Could you accept that level of vulnerability as normal, just another aspect of your job? Because real life doesn't fit neatly into hero and villain categories. You'd see them sometimes, watching from ridges or appearing near water sources, And your first reaction was always fear because you'd heard the stories, knew about raids and stolen cattle and killed cowboys. But you'd also know that you were crossing their land, driving thousands of cattle through hunting grounds, destroying grass and fouling water sources, and that from their perspective, you were the invader. Sometimes there'd be a tense negotiation, a demand for cattle as payment for passage, and your trail boss would give them a few head just to avoid conflict, pragmatic rather than principled. You'd watch them drive off the cattle and wonder what story they'd tell about this encounter, how different it would be from yours. Other times they'd ride alongside for miles, just watching, and you'd watch back, both parties assessing, neither wanting trouble. Occasionally there'd be trading, coffee or tobacco, for fresh meat or information about water ahead, and you'd realize they were just people trying to survive, same as you. But the violence was real too. You'd see the aftermath of raids, burned wagons, and dead men, and you'd sleep with your rifle close, knowing that desperation and anger could turn any encounter deadly. The government was pushing them onto reservations, starving them out, breaking treaties, and you were part of that machine, whether you wanted to be or not, just by being there, by pushing cattle through. Today we like clean historical narratives, clear good guys and bad guys, simple morality. But have you ever been part of something morally complex, where you understood both sides, where your survival depended on doing things you knew weren't entirely right? Could you live with that ambiguity, that guilt, without the comfort of knowing you were on the correct side? The end of trail life came differently for every man, but it always came because the body could only take so much. You'd see it in the older cowboys, men in their 40s who looked 60, bent and broken, unable to mount a horse without help, their hands twisted with arthritis. They'd take jobs as cooks or camp hands, work that didn't require riding, or they'd drift to town and take whatever work they could find. Stable hand, store clerk, night watchman, anything that let them stay indoors. Some would save enough to buy a small piece of land, try their hand at ranching on a tiny scale, spending their broken bodies on a dream of ownership that rarely worked out. Others would just disappear, drifting further west or south, chasing the myth of one more season, one more steak, unable to accept that they were used up. A few would drink themselves to death, their bodies too damaged to heal, the pain constant, whiskey the only medicine they could afford. The lucky ones would find a woman willing to marry a broken cowboy, would settle into domestic life, their trail days becoming stories they'd tell on porches, editing out the worst parts, making it all sound more romantic than it ever was. You'd know your time was ending when the morning stiffness didn't fade, when you couldn't grip a rope properly anymore, when mounting a horse became an ordeal that took several attempts. There was no pension, no retirement plan, no safety net. You just stopped being useful and have to figure out what came next with whatever money you'd managed to save, which was usually nothing, and whatever skills you'd learned, which were mostly useless off a horse. Today we plan for retirement, calculate our 401k balances, worry about having enough saved for our golden years. But what if your career had a built-in expiration date, where your body would simply give out and you'd be worthless at the only thing you knew how to do? Could you face that future, knowing it was coming, with no plan and no resources? The truth about cowboy life is that it was brutal, short, and paid terribly, but it offered something we've lost in exchange for comfort and security. It offered complete presence. Every moment demanded your full attention because distraction meant injury or death. You couldn't check your phone, couldn't zone out, couldn't go through the motions. You were intensely alive in a way that's almost impossible to achieve in modern life, where we're safe and comfortable and consequently half asleep most of the time. Cowboys lived entirely in their bodies, in the present moment, connected to animals and landscape and weather in ways we can barely imagine now. The price was enormous, your health, your comfort, your future, but the experience was undeniably real. No cowboy would trade places with you given the choice, because they'd look at your life expectancy, your medical care, your salary, your heated home, and think they'd won the lottery. But some part of you, reading this, feels a pull toward that intensity, that realness, that complete engagement with life, despite all its hardships. So now you know what being a cowboy was really like, stripped of the Hollywood gloss and the frontier mythology. These men weren't heroes or legends. They were workers doing a hard job for poor pay and dangerous conditions, and most of them would have quit in a heartbeat if something better had been available. The fact that we remember them at all, that we've built an entire mythology around their work, says more about what we've lost than what they had. Drop a comment below telling me which aspect of real cowboy life surprised you most. Hit that like button if you appreciate history without the sugarcoating, subscribe, and click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this.